Hello, everybody, and welcome to AMA number 24 with Holochain and Holo. It is March 25th, and we are live streaming. We're going to start off with some intros, some thank yous, get into some announcements and updates, dive into some frequently asked questions, and then our AMA, meaning you're welcome to ask us anything you want to have us answer right in the chat. We've got some team members on the back end who will be gathering those things and making them visible for those of us on the call to be able to read and answer. So some intros. I'm Matthew Schutte. I'm the Director of Communications for Holo. I'm here with David Atkinson, the Commercial Director for Holo, Mary Camacho, the Executive Director for Holo, and Alastair. I actually don't have Alastair's title. Alastair, can you unmute and tell us what your title is? It's Alastair Ong.
Officially, my title is asset manager, but I think for the purpose of this, I spend a lot of time on the currency design and the non-technical aspects of it.
Awesome. Okay, next up is our thank yous. Once again, we'd like to thank our collaborators, contributors, supporters, community builders, partners, and app/platform creators who all share the vision of a more distributed internet. Thank you for creating content and resources for the community. Many of you continue to take to the streets of the web to share Holo and Holochain's message. Again, want to thank you all for your efforts and the knowledge that you share. Special thanks to those who are writing, reviewing, and/or creating developer and community resources to increase engagement and awareness. We want to work with all of you to realize the vision of an expanding, community-controlled, distributed web. On to the announcements. We have some exciting events and meetups scheduled for the remainder of the first quarter and going into the second quarter of 2019. In New York City on March 25th, that's today, we have a blockchain showcase featuring Holochain. We will share the link to that in the chat. In Barcelona on March 27th, there's going to be a 4-hour workshop called Getting Started with Holochain. Again, we'll share that link too. Again, on that same day in London, we're going to have a Holochain meetup. It's the first one we've had in a long time. And Alastair, are you going to be at that? Unmuting.
Yeah, yes, I will actually, and I'm actually talking at that.
Wonderful.
About currency design.
Great. So go see Alastair. We'll share the link in the chat. And we recently held a Holochain intensive on the Sunshine Coast of Australia. We had a few dozen developers, many of whom are building companies using Holochain, get together for 3 days of co-learning. David, can you say a bit about what they were up to at the intensive?
Yeah, sure. I've had absolutely fantastic feedback from the intensive. So there were about 35 people there and 5 of our team members, and we were supporting a bunch of activities. So partially it was designing and building some core Holochain components like authorship, searching, and the UI library. They're kind of like our core apps that sit on top of the Holochain core code. There's a bunch of networking and connections because projects in the stage that they're in are all looking for, whether it's a relationship, whether it's someone who knows something about funding potentially, or someone who's come and solved a problem in a really interesting way. So they're looking for connections and collaboration. And then there was a lot of learning done, co-learning around mutual credit currencies, better design patterns, long-term vision of Holochain, that kind of stuff. And we had some feedback around both what was designed, but then especially the connections made and the possibility for collaboration between groups that were previously working separately has been a real highlight of the feedback so far.
Yeah, and that's a pattern that we're hoping to do a whole lot more of. The people who are really diving in and committed and gaining experience, we want them learning alongside one another. And so we're going to be continuing to put our thumb on the scale, basically, to accelerate the maturing of those co-learning communities.
A big shout out, Matt, just thinking if from what we've just shared, if it sounds exciting, should definitely get in touch in the chat or start getting in touch through Telegram or Mattermost, and start building your own community and see if you're going to get to the stage to put on something like this intensive.
Yeah, and so that intensive is maybe one of the more intense, one of the more intense meetup kind of opportunities or community gathering events. But we have a bunch of others as well. So if you'd like to join a meetup community, look for a city or region specific channel on our chat channel. That's chat.holochain.org. We refer to it as Mattermost often, but that's where it lives, chat.holochain.org. If you don't find one in your local area, you can organize your own. We recommend starting by creating a chat channel for your city or region and announcing it on the announcements channel. We'd be happy to help connect you with other organizers and provide guidance where needed. You can email events@holo.host. Eric Bear, one of our team members, will be happy to help. Mary, is there anything you want to share before we dive into the FAQs?
I sure do. So just a quick little intro. Again, thanks everybody for being here with us tonight, or today, depending on what time zone that you're in, because we know this happens everywhere all at once. So basically, yeah, we put out another update last Friday from the organization, and we started having, a little bit was about how we're doing with our closed testnet, giving people a view into some of the architecture. That was kind of fun to put together. And then we're also have been in the process of updating some of our design documentation for HoloFuel. And this was why we decided to sort of move the conversation into HoloFuel and start sharing a little bit more about what's happening there. And we specifically wanted to talk about how hosts are beginning to be selected and how they're routing to them, and even more so, the service logs are supporting or validating HoloFuel redemption from the reserves. All of this is coming together as part of what we're describing in these design documents. And we'll be sharing more of these as we get them finalized. We're doing reviews of drafts right now, and we're getting ready to get those out to the community sometime soon. But I think what's most important now is that we wanted to clarify a few things about the rollout of HoloFuel, because a lot of questions have been happening, coming in from the community on Twitter and other places. And so we want to talk about it at like the phasing of it, because it's really key. In each phase, there's going to be different answers to a lot of the questions that people are asking. And for instance, one of the one that comes up is, will there be one-to-one parity? That's a very regular question that we've seen. And the thing is that it's complex and it's different depending on the test period, or the period that we're in with HoloFuel, sorry. So real quickly, just to kind of recap, in case you didn't see that article, I just want to say that when we're talking today, you might hear us reference some of these, and it may be a good idea to go check it out. There's going to be the testnet period, and that's like when we're in open alpha and full feature alpha for Holo. And then we're going to move into our mainnet, our beta release. And that's going to be what we're calling an initial period for HoloFuel, and things are going to be pretty stable. And I'm not going to go into all the details that the update did. But then after that, what's going to happen is as certain things begin to happen, whether it's HoloFuel getting listed on an exchange or us enabling some other functionality, we're going to go into what's called a transitionary period. And then after that, at some point, and we'll clarify this a little bit later as we're talking, at some point we may announce the end of a swap period. That when we make that announcement, that's when there's going to be a 6-month time period that starts. That's not at the beginning of the transitional period. It's sometime within. We don't know how long that will last. It depends on how long it takes for some of these things to come online. And then once that happens, once the end of that swap period has occurred, that's what we're calling the post-swap period. So when you read through these things and understand some of these questions that we're trying to answer today, keep in mind that there's a lot of complexity, and about the timing, it really does matter in how these things play out. So that's about it. I think we're going to dive right into the FAQs, or the questions that you guys are asking. So take it away, Matthew.
Okay. So let's see. First up, probably one of the largest problems with crypto adoption is getting large organizations / companies to build apps. In this case, it would be HAPs, to build HAPs off their project. How do you plan to attract more companies and users to build apps? How will this be competitive and stand out against Ethereum, Tron, and EOS? David, do you want to touch on that?
Thanks, Matt. I spend a lot of time thinking about and working on this question. So we're not going to share what we would consider to be a lot of our competitive advantage. So I won't touch on some of the final points of the question. But I'd say that, firstly, over time, my feeling is this is one of the great opportunities for us to show why the patterns of Holochain actually drive adoption for distributed applications, whereas some of the patterns of the blockchain platforms that are mentioned here don't. One way that we look at this is across the spectrum of public and private network solutions. So with Holochain, we can give public solutions with the scalability of private solutions, and then private solutions with the connectivity of public ones. So we see ourselves as a really great fit for these enterprises and institutions that are talked about in the question. And then we come on to some of the details. So Holochain is free, not only to build apps with, but to run. It's efficient, and efficiency and interoperability is far greater than any of the other blockchain competitors. Our apps can evolve, so you don't have to get the smart contract perfect before launching. We're super committed to building high quality, easy to use components that play well with others, so it's cheaper, faster, and easier to build. And when you're choosing between a different blockchain platform, often the choice is mirrored in just a simple configuration in the Holochain DNA. So I think some of these examples just show how committed we are to building really, really scalable, but also fast and easy to build solutions on Holochain. And then there's the other part of this, which is just attracting users to build apps. Also talks about how do you build a really strong developer community. And for that, we've talked about several times, but more information, jump into our Telegram and Mattermost groups or ask more questions on the chat for how you can get involved.
Yeah, I think just to add one tiny little bit there is we're working our tail off to make it as easy to build apps as possible. And the community building efforts are part of that, right? We're trying to make it easier for people to not just understand Holochain, but to understand what kinds of things are possible as not only we create those, but others come up with new things. And that's the kind of co-learning that was happening at the intensive this last week that was so awesome. All right, next question. How exactly is one's HoloFuel credit limit calculated? Have you decided on a formula for calculation? If so, is it still open to be changed after the full version of HoloHost goes live? Mary, do you want to take this one?
Sure. There's a bunch of different questions in there. Let me know if my video is messing up, and I'll turn it off and go straight audio though. Just a first thing, credit limits are going to be algorithmically set, and mostly this will be based on host performance and history. So like I was mentioning before, that's going to take something. There's going to be an on-ramp of sorts for this because it takes time for people to build up history and for it to become useful. So we're finalizing some of those formulas based on design decisions in the Holo platform. And we're going to share more explicitly as that work is implemented in the testing periods of open alpha and full feature alpha. So with regard to changes, there's certainly going to be a possibility for iteration of the algorithm. You know, David was talking just a moment ago about how what we're intending is to be able to build apps that you can make changes to, that it won't be as difficult. Now, there's going to be still some issues there that's why we have our test periods that are so important. But there's a couple of things that are really important to me to say about that, that change. Right now, there's a lot of areas where we're doing technical design work, and we're looking at how we're going to phase in governance that is progressively more distributed and has a direct feedback from the community of users. So how it will change, I can't tell you at this point, in the same way that I'm not telling you the exact algorithm at this point. But that it will change, most likely, yes, it's going to be iterated upon, and it will become better and better for the community.
Thank you, Mary.
I think I got it.
Yep, and the audio sounded good, at least from my end. Okay, so here we go. Next one is, are there any plans for a Holochain conference at some point for users, partners, and enthusiasts? What about meetups for the community? Well, I'll start by saying, yes, we're doing lots of meetups. We talked about those before. But for the rest of this, David, you want to take it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we've had meetups in over 70 cities, and we've got a pretty vibrant online and in-person meetup community, and doing lots and lots of time and effort making sure that we're creating the nice bridge between online and offline interactions for our community. It's not just a meetup focus for us. So we talked earlier about the intensive that we held in the Sunshine Coast, and the way of having people close to our community, both doing some co-learning and also getting involved in building core components and designing core components. We've had a series of dev camps, and we're always looking at ways of powering the growth of Holochain through our community. In terms of a conference, yeah, we've been talking about holding larger scale events. So there's some thinking in the pipeline, and if you'd love to get involved or give input, share ideas, please get in touch through the normal community channels. But yeah, there's some thinking going into how we can get a large number of people together and be working on the future of Holochain.
Great. Okay. Next up. Well, actually, I'm going to say one more thing there. We didn't quite mention it, but we've done a whole bunch of hackathons too, right? This intensive was kind of a more recent iteration on the more general hackathon pattern, but we've done hackathons all over the globe. But yeah, we may be doing some larger global conference type thing at some point. We'll see.
Actually, Matt, sorry, we should say private meetups as well, shouldn't we? We've done a bunch of those in different organizations or different community groups. So basically, there's a pattern that if you want to build something and you have a group of people together, then we will support you to build.
That's right. There are enterprises that are interested in building with Holochain that have started doing internal meetups. There are I'll frame them as non-governmental organizations doing the same. Often these are really large communities, right? Companies or orgs. I have no doubt we'll see government agencies and things doing similar things in the near future. And if you're interested in that, reach out to us. We would love to support you in growing that co-learning. Okay, next up. I see the HoloFuel tokenomics as a potentially weak spot / attack vector. Holochain might be a great tech that does interesting things, but could still be a poor investment compared to other projects based on weak tokenomics. Mary, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, I would love to. There's a couple of things going on here with some of the questions, and they're great. I just want to appreciate the community for asking all the questions that you guys are bringing to us right now. So Holo is exactly about great tech, and Holochain is that tech, and we're doing great things with it. Holo is a platform that we're building on top of Holochain. Our currency, HoloFuel, is intended to be one that represents the growing value within a cloud hosting platform, representing the assets, the capacity that's available and used within that system. I know people want to talk about tokenomics, and that's great, but HoloFuel is not a token. HoloFuel, and by extension, HOT, are reflecting real fundamentals of what we're building. And I expect that many people who have purchased HOT as an investment probably are pretty happy about it. I mean, it's been okay since our ICO, and that's before we even get to launch. But our focus as a company, we're really focused on building our product and basically growing the value of the underlying platform. And that is both sides of it, the adoption that David's been talking about, the tech, and the fuel, which is the currency, the movement of value within that platform. It will grow in value as people are using it. That is the point. So I'll leave it to each investor to decide for themselves, but I'm betting on it, and I'm going to work to make it happen too. Can I just say one other?
Yeah, go ahead. ahead.
So there was another question. I popped this in earlier. There's another question that came in earlier or later today that I want to answer. And people keep asking me about holoports and why do we care about HoloFuel if there aren't any holoports and what's going on with this project? We're building something huge. That's what we keep telling you. And I get it. It's frustrating. We did the Holo, we started pre-sales of holoports over a year ago, and it's taken a while. But the holoports are part of this larger thing. They don't work until we get to a place where Holo is fully functioning, and that's open alpha. So we're at this point timing that together. And so holoports are on track. We've been communicating about them diligently with lots of communications, and HoloFuel won't even be available until we get to our beta release. HoloFuel will be in a test form when we're in our open alpha release and our full feature release for everybody. It's also in a test form, essentially, in our closed alpha. So just wanted to throw that out. I think it's important. I think the holoports are huge. I think the whole thing goes together, and we need to really get as a community that it's not one thing or one part or piece. It's about the interactions.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. I did want to get on my high horse a little bit about the tokenomics question as well, however. So this is my take, personally, but the tokenomics of most blockchain projects look to me like a Ponzi scheme. People, there's folks that invest a little bit of money in early, and then other people invest and their stuff goes up, but there's no actual real world value getting created by most blockchain projects, right? There's no actual economic activity being fostered. It's just Ponzi scheme economics. And because people have gotten used to that Ponzi scheme look, they sometimes complain that Holochain doesn't have similar tokenomics, i.e., it doesn't look like a Ponzi scheme. So our goals are different. We weren't just trying to get some money. Our design is different. And over the last year, as Mary pointed out, this hasn't seemed to hurt us. Let's say you held on to ETH over the last year that's now worth $10,000 today. If you had instead used that ETH to purchase HOT during our ICO, it would be worth about $370,000. That doesn't mean that our tokenomics are perfect, right? But because realistically, we're not doing tokenomics, we're doing economics. We're trying to design for an economic system. But I think that performance indicates that we haven't failed too miserably in explaining what our system is and why it's been designed the way it has. If you are interested, you can dive into the details, whether that's the white papers, all the updates, etc. We're doing the best we can to communicate this stuff. And I'm familiar, being the director of communications, I'm familiar with the fact that it's difficult to describe currency design, especially when it's not currency design that people are familiar with, right? It's hard to teach new things. Will we continue attempting to describe what a healthy currency system design looks like or should look like? Yes. But doing something new is hard, and communicating it clearly is not a whole lot easier. So we're going to keep trying, but it is not the simplest thing to describe systems that actually are functional full economic systems, not just tokenomic schemes. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to be on my high horse for just a moment. Next up, we have why is the dynamic supply of HoloFuel needed? Finding a price point is essentially what exchanges do. Isn't dynamic supply just overcomplicating things? Mary, do you want to take this one on as well?
Well, I'm going to start with this one, but then I'm going to really hand it over to Alastair to talk about our system. So, but I was trying to answer this question to someone else earlier today, and I started down this path, and it may not make a lot of sense, but let's talk about dynamic supply like housing, right? People build houses, and we talk about the supply of houses. As demand increases, more builders go out there, they build more houses, and that doesn't necessarily mean that your house just went down in value. Oftentimes your house is going up quite well in value because demand is high, right? But sometimes that continues, and then sometimes things happen. But what's interesting about houses is that when demand starts dropping, you don't go get rid of houses. And so you don't really have much control over the supply when it comes to something like housing. I mean, it has some change, but with HoloFuel, one of the great things about designing HoloFuel is that it's something that is kind of growing. It can also shrink. So there's this great idea that as people, we're not growing HoloFuel, we're not just issuing HoloFuel until there's more need. That's one of the most important things that people should really get. As the system starts, there is HoloFuel because we're converting it from hot, right? We're moving hot into HoloFuel based on capacity, based on need. And then more is not going to go get generated until we need it, until there's demand for it. So I want to hand this over and let Alastair keep talking about it, because he can really describe some of the more intricate aspects of it better than I can.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, so I think there is a difference between finding a price point and managing to a relatively stable price. They're very different things. Exchanges are great at the former. They're great at finding a price point. And to be honest, we are reliant on exchanges for a lot of our early price discovery, as Mary probably mentioned in the leadership post, right? Where in the early phases of HoloFuel, there aren't a huge amount of reserves. There isn't a particularly dynamic supply. And we are reliant on exchanges to try to work out an initial price for HoloFuel. But once we get to that initial price, then we want to start to manage supply dynamically so that that price becomes more stable. Because exchanges simplistically find prices through through supply and demand, and if you have dynamic demand and fixed supply, then you're just going to get dynamic price, or very dynamic price, which is great for for some people, but as a medium of exchange currency, trying to support and facilitate a currency, we do want some level of long-term price stability that allows all our users to have confidence and make longer-term plans, investment plans on our platform.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so funny to me. I look at people who go, "What? That wouldn't make any sense." And I go, "Well, if you want people actually paying for hosting, in order to do that, they've got to feel confident that holding their money in that currency isn't going to make them lose all of its value." And then you have the opposite side as well, where people put money into the currency and they don't actually want to spend it for hosting because they're hoping that it goes up a ton in value. And so if you create these highly volatile currency designs, it actually undermines the usage of that currency. Alastair?
I just want to add to that. I often hear points about how, in the short term, no one really cares that much about price volatility, and that's true. But when we're going to, an enterprise and saying, "Hey, you should build and invest in software that runs on Holochain and requires Holo hosting," that's a multi-year investment from them, and therefore they need to have a multi-year level of confidence.
Awesome. Okay, next question. This is kind of related. With the token reserve pool, why can't people who are getting free HoloFuel for hosting simply undercut the price on the exchanges, causing downward price pressure on the exchanges? It's funny to me how often our questions that come in misunderstand some of the system dynamics. But I'm going to throw this one to Mary. Mary, do you want to comment?
I do want to comment. There's no people who are just receiving free HoloFuel. It doesn't work that way. It's earned. You're providing hosting services in a competitive marketplace. Not only that, you are paying to provide that service as well. People have holoports. They're paying for the power that are running them. They're paying for the bandwidth. They're paying for things that are part of the service that's being provided. So, I mean, when you go to work and you get paid, you don't describe that as free money. Same thing, HoloFuel, it's not free. They're not receiving it that way. I'm going to let Alastair also take a little bit about the undercut on the prices in the exchange. I know he was talking a little bit about how exchanges are working, and we will have the potential for pricing. This was the parity conversation, being different sometimes between what we're doing on our reserves and how people might convert hot and HoloFuel on an exchange. But Alastair, why don't you go into more detail, because there's a little bit more to say there.
I'm really sorry. I actually missed the question because I was trying to sort out a mic issue.
Oh, no worries. We can skip it and we'll come back to it later.
Okay. I will add my little flavor on it as well, which is if you go to work and somebody pays you for working, you don't describe that as getting free money, right? And it's the same with HoloFuel.
Right.
Okay, next up, who administers the reserve pool? Is it done by smart contracts? Can the team potentially access this fund to sell tokens for legitimate or perhaps not so legitimate purposes? There's some other questions about how the details there. Alastair, can you dive in here and help clear some of this up?
On the reserves? Yeah, so we are looking at different options for reserve administration. But as a general rule, whether we are looking to self-administer or work with a partner, we want to ensure on-chain transparency, wherever possible. So for HoloFuel and hot reserve, then that's going to be smart contracts on the Ethereum network side for hot, and on-chain transparency within Holochain for HoloFuel. Wherever we aren't able to do that, so for example, with US dollars, we'll be looking at legal and regulatory protection, insurance, and other sort of old world mechanisms for protection. Then the second part of that question, will the team then be able to sell reserves or sell tokens held in reserves? Well, tokens, almost certainly not. Well, that's definitely not something we want to do. Those tokens are held to be paid to hosts for the work that they do. So it's not something that we want to be diluting, obviously. If it's something like US dollars, then we're not going to go and take US dollars, but to handle operating costs, we may put them in bank deposits or buy treasuries or other fairly low risk instruments that generate some level of interest to go pay for the insurance on the reserves that we need and so on. And for all of these mechanisms and for the risk tolerance that's required, we are looking at, as Mary said previously, various forms of governance to ensure the right level of transparency and community feedback.
Mary, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just want to jump in on this and say something. So Holo is at this point responsible for administering the reserve. So that is to answer the question directly. And the first reserve that we're going to have initially when we go into beta is simply a hot reserve. A hot reserve it's an ERC20 token. So it will be one that has smart contracts going in and out of it. So, and it also is transparent, as Alastair was discussing, because it's out there on the blockchain. You can go look at all of the activity going in and out of it. We also, and Alastair pointed to this, will have in the future other types of reserves that we will be administering. And we don't have everything flat about those currently. We're working with partners. We're working with the regulatory process here in Gibraltar to really define how that's going to go. But one of the things that we are committed to is having as much visibility as possible. One of the things that we know the community is concerned about is that, well, this just has a connection back to the same world, the banking world, and we don't have any visibility to what you're doing with it. That's something we'd like to figure out how to solve. We don't have the answers today for that, but we're interested in making that better and better. And then we're going to start with governance, and then we're going to move where we can with visibility.
Wonderful. Okay, next question. Since HoloFuel is asset-backed, processing plus computation plus storage. Do you see the floor price for hosts being driven downwards due to people hosting in countries where these assets are relatively cheap to purchase or use? Alastair, can you take this one on?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to this question. One is whether the cost of hosting and therefore the price of hosting will be driven downwards. And I think implicit in this question is this is whether, as the price of that hosting goes down, the price of HoloFuel itself goes down. So I'll start by answering the hosting question generally. I think it's a fact of life that hosts with natural advantages, such as access to cheap resources, will make use of that. Whether they will make use of that by continuously dropping the floor price versus just pocketing the extra profit margin they get is not something that that we can predict. But there's always a concern about floor prices where if one set of hosts has access to much lower prices, they could drop the floor price up to a point where no one else can compete, and then you have a centralized system. And because Holochain apps need some level of redundancy, then that creates a natural level of protection against de facto centralization. Now, the other part of the question was, if the price of hosting is going down, does that mean the value of HoloFuel goes down? I don't think that those are necessarily correlated. In fact, as per one of Art's previous articles, if the cost of hosting goes down, then there's plenty of scenarios where that means that HoloFuel can buy more hosting and the price of HoloFuel actually goes up. But again, that's not a price prediction. It could really go in many different directions. It's not something that we can predict.
Wonderful. I was going to say something else there, but I think I'll leave it be. Oh, well, actually, the one thing I was going to say is this. There's not going to be one price for HoloFuel, because the services that different people are offering as hosts are going to vary. There are going to be purchasers that are looking for cheapest hosting. There are going to be purchasers who are looking for really low latency, and they're willing to pay a premium for that. There are going to be services that are looking for hosting that is within a particular regulatory jurisdiction for legal reasons, whether those are banks or somebody else who is not okay legally to have their data stored or processed outside of a particular jurisdiction. The fact that something is cheap overseas isn't going to impact them, because that's not really going to meet their need. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all hosting costs, X. No, it's an ecosystem of hosting provision and hosting consumption with very different needs. And early on it may be simple because there won't be that many things, but this could get pretty varied over time. All right, I'll leave that there. Next one. Will the internal data gathered to set the hosting floor price be updated in real time / every minute? This kind of touches on the little high horse point that I just made, but Mary, do you want to add some stuff there?
Working on getting myself unmuted. So are we talking about the real time question? Sorry, I was getting ready for another one that was coming.
Yes, the hosting floor price in real time.
Yeah, right now that hasn't been decided. We're not looking at doing anything in real time at this moment in terms of pricing. First of all, people are setting their own prices, like Matthew just said, and so you'll be setting it and changing it when you feel like it. I mean, I would look to something, it's probably a little, not a perfect comparison, but if you look at something like Airbnb, hosts on Airbnb are not going and changing their hosting price every day. They set a price that they think is going to be a good price for a while. Similarly, Microsoft Azure and AWS are not going and changing their pricing for hosting on a regular basis. So I think to Alastair's point earlier, there's going to be some shifts as price stability, as people start finding what the right prices is to charge for different services, because this is new. It's a new group of people selling this service, and it's a new group of people buying these services. But stability about those prices will emerge.
Great. Okay, next up, will the hot to HoloFuel migration happen automatically on exchanges? And will a list of supported exchanges be made public in the nearish future? Mary, do you want to touch on this?
Sure thing. So the hot to HoloFuel migration isn't a migration. You have the opportunity to convert your hot to HoloFuel is what's going to be happening. And the way that that's going to work is through a reserve, the hot reserve. And so what will happen is that as you become, as you sign up basically for the platform, depending on what role you have, there will be different levels of KYC that are required. We talked about that in our identity post up on Medium. I think that's important. We'll have more details about that in the future as well. But basically, after you've gone through that, you'll basically use the hot reserve to swap your hot for HoloFuel. It is completely optional. You do not have to do it right when it opens up. Some people, they want to do that because they want to move into HoloFuel to be able to use the Holo network. That's really important. I mean, people have to have HoloFuel if they want to be on the network. But others may not do it. Others may just hold it as hot for a while as well, and that's completely valid. But there's going to be demand because people will need to use it inside the network. So there will be people buying basically HoloFuel if there is no conversion. So that will mean that there's more demand. It will be going up. So excuse me, I just made a misstep because I was confusing the transitional period with our initial period. This is what I was talking about the complexity. At the beginning, there is no other way for you to get in. If people want to use HoloFuel, they will have to go through the hot reserve and convert their hot to HoloFuel. It won't be until later, until it's on open exchanges. And it's going to take a while for an exchange to be able to list HoloFuel. We know that people are interested, but there's tech that has to be written. There are things that have to be accomplished for that to happen. It will not be immediate upon our beta launch. So after that point is when people could do it in multiple ways. Hopefully that was better second time around.
Sounds good to me. All right, what else do we have here? We've got a question from Cartman and a whole bunch of numbers, but I like the South Park reference. Pundi was based on providing the public with POS machines, but surprised the market with a decision to produce blockchain phones as well. Has Holo any surprises for the market in the near future? I can jump on this. We don't have any announcements like that planned right now. I'm not ruling out phones or satellites or even opening hamburger stands, but the reality is that right now we're more likely to stick to our knitting and partner with other organizations if we felt some strategic advantage would be gained by stepping into some particular space. We're going to work on building Holochain and building Holo and building community. There's lots of things that people can create. We want to encourage them to create. We want to support them in creating those things. Are we going to go do what one of the other organizations in the space did and purchase a satellite company in the next few months? Nope, probably not. Right? That's not how we're going to spend our time right now. We're too busy working on our own stuff for the time being. So none of those things are happening. And if we were to announce something like that, we would announce it when we were ready to unveil it. That wouldn't be sort of a in the middle of an AMA. Oh, by the way, we happen to be purchasing a satellite company, kind of. That's not normally our announcement strategy. All right, what else do we got here? When do holoports ship? And what about the second wave of holoports? I didn't order mine like the Indiegogo backers.
Hey, I'll take this one again.
When the Holo store.
It's important. I know we talked about holoports just a minute ago, but I think this has got an important aspect to the question. So I think we should just really quickly touch on it. Holoports are going to go out when they're at the distributor and ready for open alpha. And that's been communicated in other places. However, the question here that's distinct is the Indiegogo backers versus the Holo store open and the second chance. And just to be perfectly clear, the Indiegogo holoports are the priority to go out first, but essentially we're having them all manufactured at the same time. And so they will be going out immediately following that. And that is a requirement for running an Indiegogo campaign. I will just make sure that everybody understands that is explicitly. If you sell things on an Indiegogo campaign, they must go out first. You cannot send them out to somebody else first. So that's why I'm answering that.
So we're not planning to do that. That would just kind of suck in general. That would feel like not treating people very well. And caretaking is kind of a core value of our organization and I think our community. And so we want to take care of people well. All right, next up. If you're so sure about your project, I like the the vim that's part of this. If you're so sure about your project, why don't large companies go in joint? I'm assuming they mean joint partnership or something like that. David, do you want to take this one on?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think there's a follow-up to some of the conversation before. I think, firstly, we really believe in building great things. So great products, great relationships, great community. And it's just one of our beliefs is that things have to be real. And we want to focus on taking care of the core first. We've talked about it so much today, making sure the tech is right, making sure the community is well supported, is nourished. And when those things are in place, which is happening rapidly, then we believe we're creating the conditions for many, many, many organizations to go in joint or to build solutions on top of Holochain. We know there's interest. There are lots of meetings that happen, but for us, a meeting is the beginning of a relationship. It's not a partnership. It's not a cause for an announcement. It's just an exploration. And so when it's the right time for people to be seriously building the enterprise scale applications on Holochain, we know that they can and will, then they will tell the world about it because they will want to tell the world because the solutions we believe they'll be building will be transformational. We want them to tell stories. We want our community to be telling the stories. We want people building applications to be telling the stories. It'll be way more exciting than us sitting here telling you the stories of what people are building. And that's what we think is going to happen.
Yeah, I've heard gratitude from some of the folks that we've been in conversation with that we that we don't have a meeting and then go make announcements. Because I've heard other stories as well where they go, yeah, I received an email from someone. I replied to their email and suddenly our logo was on their website. We're in talks with so-and-so. Yeah, that's not our way of doing business. All right, next up. Is token velocity a real problem? Can we even talk about token velocity in a double entry accounting system? Thank you. All right, Alastair, do you want to take this one on?
Sure. So I'm not entirely sure what the definition of a problem is here, but I'm assuming it's something to do with HoloFuel price. In the long term, the fact that HoloFuel has a dynamic supply should mean that monetary velocity isn't a major factor. It will depend on time frame, so it may be a factor in the sub 1 hour price volatility type of time frame, but hopefully not in the intraday or the intraday time frame. In the short and medium term, and as Mary had explained in terms of our phasing, the supply doesn't start off dynamic, and even when it does become dynamic, that dynamic supply and its responsiveness phases in gradually. So during that period, HoloFuel's velocity will probably be a factor in pricing.
And Alastair, for those who aren't familiar with the technical jargon of economic theory, what is monetary velocity?
Yeah, sure. Monetary velocity is essentially how fast a unit of currency cycles in the economy. So generally, when people are looking at things like inflation rate, which you could describe as the price of currency, the high-level theory is that the combination of the amount of money and the velocity by which that money circulates through the economy is going to be equal or proportional to the size of the economy. And everyone always latches onto this theory for cryptocurrencies because you have a fixed supply, you have some sort of expectation about the underlying economy, and therefore the big unknown is the velocity.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, we've got another slightly more practical, not that these things aren't practical, but ordinary person kind of concern question here. I just bought HOT on Binance. I have no idea about when will it shift to a coin from ERC20 token, I think they mean HoloFuel, where we can store it. Basically, very new to Holo. Where can one get help in understanding it completely? Mary, do you want to take this on?
Yeah, I'd love to say something about this because first of all, I want to say thanks. You just bought HOT on Binance. That's awesome. We're really thrilled to hear that. And it's great that people who are brand new to finding about Holo are buying HOT today. So it's fantastic. So HOT is going to be convertible into HoloFuel, and that's not going to be a coin per se. HoloFuel is a currency that runs inside of the Holo network. And there's many, many, many places you can find out more about this online. And I would actually recommend that you start with our green paper. I think it's a great place. It kind of gives you a big comprehensive view of things. But in particular, you asked about wallets and those sorts of things. And so I want to just say that there's specifically another article about comparing wallets to what is a HOT account and that you can find up on our Medium channel as well. And I'd recommend that for understanding more about how you'll store it or spend it.
Is that about
Thanks.
HOT accounts or HoloFuel accounts?
Did I do that?
Yep.
I'm having a bad word day.
So yes, we got an article about wallets versus HoloFuel accounts. In the meantime, since what you purchased is HOT, it is just an ERC20 token, and so you will be storing it, holding on to it, controlling it in the same way as any other ERC20 token. We can recommend things like hardware wallets as extra safety measures, but basically you're holding onto and keeping secret your private key so that only you can spend those tokens and nobody else can. There's lots of resources available online, but that's the story on HOT. As HoloFuel comes in, that wallets versus accounts article will give a little bit of clarity about what kind of things will change should you decide to convert your HOT into HoloFuel. Okay, other questions. And for those of you who are online, please ask more questions. We would love to hear more of your questions. We're starting to actually run short on them in the chat at the moment. We have, hi all, will the HoloFuel token, not a token, but will HoloFuel have the same value as the HOT token? And will it be of benefit to those holding the token to keep it if we are not planning on using it for the platform dApp needs? So they're not planning to do hosting. Alastair, do you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so there's obviously a question of timeframes in terms of the various phases of HoloFuel and overlap with HOT. During the swap period when HOT and HoloFuel both exist, we will honor a one-to-one swap, and that by honoring that one-to-one swap, that means obviously that if you have HOT, you can get HoloFuel at the same rate, and that means that will keep the prices of them probably the same or close together. And there's a little bit of an asterisk there where so there's possibly a period very early on before HoloFuel is listed on exchanges where HoloFuel might be priced lower. And the reason for that is not because of the underlying value, but simply because if there's no way to trade it, there's no liquidity, and that obviously creates a discount. But the question for anyone holding HOT is that an issue? And I'd say it's not, because HOT continues to be traded. So if you're holding HOT and the price of HoloFuel is lower, then why would you exchange it for HoloFuel to sell? You would just trade HOT and continue to hold HOT until the price equalizes. And I do think the price will equalize. And the reason for that is because the underlying value is the same thing. So it's just a matter of the differences in market liquidity. Oh, and sorry, there's a second part to that question, which is, so is there benefit to hold it if you don't plan to use it for DApp needs? Well, I can think of two, right? So obviously there are people who are holding it to sell it, right? So for speculative investments. Secondly, and hopefully more importantly, we would hope that HoloFuel becomes increasingly adopted as a currency, given that it has many great qualities as a medium of exchange, right? In terms of eventual price, eventual value stability, fast transaction speeds, no mining required, and so on.
Yeah, so we've designed HoloFuel as a currency for our hosting ecosystem. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the only thing that other people will use it for. And I don't even want to make predictions about what the world looks like if that starts to get adopted, because that becomes kind of crazy. All right, next up, as the hosts can have a negative balance of HoloFuel, my question is, if a host defaults, who would be responsible for the loss? Thanks. Does anybody want to take this one? Maybe Mary?
Yeah, I'll take that. So here's the thing. Fees are collected on most of the transactions that are going to be used by Holo to self-insure against some of the defaults. So there may be some amount of default, but part of the management of that algorithm for credit limits is to make sure that we keep that in the a space of usability, that we don't have people having extreme credit limits, that the credit limits actually just allow for the flow and the use of the platform. That's the intention there. But we'll be managing for those things as well internally.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just say one other quick thing. We have had a ton of questions come up tonight about the Holoports, and apparently we're not answering the questions correctly. And I just want to acknowledge that. So one of the things here is people are asking about, are they going to ship this month 100%? What has been communicated is that they're going to ship from the distributor. The reason we're just not saying this is because nothing's changed from the communications that have been previously written. And so it wasn't the focus of the AMA. It wasn't to avoid anything. Please check out all of the previous communications. They're still accurate.
For those who haven't read those, does that mean they're not shipping this month, Mary?
They are shipping from the distributor. We have not. They're going to take time in landing at the distributors and doing all of those things. And so I don't have dates that they're shipping from the distributor to the end user at this point.
Okay, because there's multiple distributors, right? There's the manufacturer, and that's going out to distributors in other, let's say, countries, and
Yes.
then it's only later that will leave those distributors and be sent to people's homes, for instance. Wonderful. Okay. And actually, we are basically at the end of the hour. Is there any one last question that somebody really wants to answer?
I can answer the question about how will the price of HoloFuel be controlled to be stable. Yeah, so
can you read it
just wanna,
out loud for them
yeah.
so nobody else can see it?
Sure. How will the price of HoloFuel be controlled to be stable after announcements, etc.? So the simple answer is we don't, because we don't control the price of HoloFuel. What we are trying to manage for is the internal price of hosting. So roughly how much hosting a unit of HoloFuel can buy. So if that hosting is expected to become more valuable, such as after some major adoption announcement, then we're comfortable for the price of HoloFuel to also rise, and obviously vice versa.
Okay. So the key part there is we don't control the price of HoloFuel.
Exactly. That's why we always say we're value stable, not price stable.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's going to be it for this one. So just wrap up with some thank yous again. We'd like to thank our collaborators, contributors, supporters, community builders, partners, as well as all the people that are creating apps or looking to build platforms who share the vision of a more distributed internet. I'm Matthew Schutte, here with David Atkinson, Mary Camacho, and Alastair Ong, as well as a bunch of other Holo team members on the back end, taking your questions, answering them in the chat. We will be back again soon. We're trying to do these things every few weeks. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.